Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Madiha Sahib from Department of Zoology, University of Education, Bank Road Campus, Lahore. Students, today we are going to talk about protochordates. Okay, let's have first the introduction of the protochordates. As their name suggests, proto means that something is that is primitive, that is original, that is earliest. Protochordates are also known as the lure chordates. These are those animals that have a rod-like structure that is flexible and that is mostly present at their mostly towards their dorsal side. That rod-like structure is called notochord. So these animals have the notochords at the certain stage of their lives. These animals are called protochordates. And protochordates exhibit organ system level organization. They have a group of the organs. Organ system means that they have the group of the organs in their body that work together and perform different functions. Okay, let's classify the protochordates. Protochordates is actually an informal category that houses only few phylums and subphylums because they are those animals that are prior to the evolution of the exact vertebrate chordates, right? So protochordates include two main phylums, phylum Hemichordates and phylum Chordata. So in Hemichordates, today we will be discussing about two main classes, class Enteropneusta and class Pterobranchia. And in the phylum Chordata, we'll be discussing two subphylums that comes under the definition of protochordates. That are the subphylum Urochordata and subphylum Cephalochordata. Otherwise, there are also subphylums of phylum Chordata, including major known phylum that is the subphylum Vertebrae, which include further classes of aves, reptilia, even mammals. But as our topic is protochordates, so we will be focusing today only on these three phylums which comes under the definition of protochords. So protochords have the phylum Hemichordata and the phylum Chordata. And within the phylum Chordata, only two subphylums will which we will discuss, that is the subphylum Urochordata and subphylum Cephalochordata. All right, so these things we are going to discuss today. Two classes of Hemichordata and two subphylums of the Chordata, because we are discussing protochordates only today. Okay, the first phylum we are going to discuss in protochordates is the phylum Hemichordata. Hemichordata, hemi means half. So the animals that are included in this phylum show only few of the chordate characteristics. That's why they are known as the hemichordates. If we talk about the characteristics one by one, then they are marine animals. They are mostly worms, acorn worms. They are marine animals, means they live in the oceanic water. They don't live in the fresh water. They are deuterostomates. And deuterostomates are those organisms in which the blastopore that is present during the embryonic development develops finally into the anus instead of the mouth. So in those animals where blastopore develops into the anus are called deuterostomate animals. And their body is divided into three regions. One is proboscis. The first part of the body is called proboscis, then collar, then trunk. Same, the coelom is also divided into three cavities. So coelom is divided into three cavities. Secondly, they have the ciliated pharyngeal slits. Slits are, openings. These are like clefts. So they have actually the gill slits that are perforated in the pharyngeal wall. Because they are perforated in the pharyngeal walls, these are like the gills openings that are joining the digestive system towards the pharynx, as well as they open outside of the body. That, and they have the cilia. That's because they are perforated in the pharyngeal wall. That's why they are also known as the pharyngeal slits or gill slits. And they have the cilia, so they are the ciliated pharyngeal slits. And open circulatory system, they don't have the circulatory system in which blood is totally confined into vessels, but they have the open circulatory system. Like do we have the closed circulatory system? Our blood never ever moves through the tissue spaces. It is always confined into vessels, into capillaries. But in case of hemichordates, they have the open circulatory system, so their blood moves through the tissue spaces openly. Next, they have the complete digestive tract. They have the proper mouth. They have the pharyngeal region. They have the intestinal region. They have the anus. So they have the complete digestive tract. They have the nerve cord that is present on the dorsal side. Dorsal side means the upper side of the worm or the animal. They have the notochord, but that is a very primitive type, and their notochord is known as the stomochord. Okay, the very first class which we are going to discuss of the phylum Hemichordata is the class Enteropneusta. So the word Enteropneusta has been derived from the Greek word entero, which means intestines, and neusta means to respire, to breathe. So because they have their gill slits are perforated in the pharyngeal wall, that's why, and they respire through the water that is being bathed in the gills and exit the body through the gill slits or gill pores. So that's why they are known as the enteroneused. If we talk about their members, then acorn worms are their members. They all are marine worms. They live in oceans. And if you talk about their size, then they range in size from 10 to 40 centimeter. Their usual size is between 10 to 40 centimeter, but some acorn worms are as long as 2 meters. So, if you talk about their species, the only 100 species have been described yet. Let's talk about their habitat. Where do they live and how do they live? Acorn worms live in burrows. They live in the oceans, but they make burrows with the help of their proboscis. They dig their burrows with the help of their proboscis in the sandy and muddy substrates of the oceans. So they live there, and their burrow shape is like the U-shaped letter U. Their burrow shape is like the letter U. Next, about the morphology of the acorn worms. If we talk about their body structure, then their body structure is divided into three parts. One is the proboscis, second one is the collar, and third one is the trunk. Proboscis, proboscis, this first region, this is extensible elongated tube-like structure is known as the proboscis. Then this ring is the collar, and the rest of the body is the trunk. So as their body is divided into three regions, proboscis, collar, and trunk, their coelom is also divided into three regions. That's why its coelom is known as tripartite coelom. Why tripartite? Because tri means three and partite mean partitions, right? So their coelom is divided into three partitions. That's why its coelom is known as the tripartite coelom. So this is the very common feature of the hemichordates that they share with the echinoderms. So we could say that they have been evolved from the echinoderms. Echinoderms also have the tripartite coelom. If we talk about their body surface, they have the ciliated epidermis. The outermost layer, as you know, of the skin or the body wall is the epidermis. So they have what kind of epidermis? They have the ciliated epidermis. They have the cilia on their epidermis, as well as they have the gland cells that covers the whole body of the acorn worms or enteroneused. Okay, another thing is mouth that is located between the proboscis and the collar. Here you can see this is the proboscis and this is the collar region, and here mouth is located. So this part, upper part of the worm is known as the dorsal and lower part is known as the ventral. So mouth is located towards the ventral side. This is the mouth. If we talk about the pharyngeal slits, then they have the variable number of pharyngeal slits. Here you can see these are the pharyngeal slits and these are the pharyngeal pouches. Pouches are like pockets. So the number of pharyngeal slits varying to few to several hundreds in the acorn worms, and they are like positioned laterally here on the trunk. This is the This is the proboscis region, then collar, and this rest of the region is the trunk. So the you can say that pharyngeal slits are present in the trunk region, and they are laterally on sidewise, like present. And now read it. Variable numbers of pharyngeal slits from a few to several hundred are positioned laterally on the trunk, right? Pharyngeal slits are openings between the anterior region of the digestive tract, called pharynx, and the outside of the body. So where the openings or the slits are present, they are present on the anterior region of the digestive tract. Anterior region is where this is the anterior region of digestive tract. As we go more here, that then the posterior region will be started. So pharyngeal slits are present at the anterior regions, and they connect where pharynx to the outside of the body. Now, digestive system of the acrine worms. As I told you, that digestive system of the acrine worm, they have the complete digestive system from mouth with gut and the least the anus. So it is very simple type of digestive system. They have the just simple tube, and this tube is divided further into the hepatic sacs and pharynx, etc. So what happened, food is digested as the diverticula of the gut. um, Gut has the pockets. Diverticula are the pouches of the gut, called hepatic sacs. These are the hepatic sacs, and they release the actually enzyme that digests the food. And the worm then extends its posterior end. The portion that contains the proboscis is known as the anterior end of the worm, and the portion that contains the that have the anus is known as the posterior end of the worm. So they have the posterior end outside of the their burrow. Rest of the body will be buried in the burrow, but for defecation they will take out their posterior end out of the burrow, and they will their fecal material like castings. Here you can see in this picture, these are the casting. This green portion represents the posterior portion of the acrine worm. The rest of the body is buried under the burrow, but this portion is out of the burrow. Why? Because of the for the defecation, this is all the waste material of the acorn worm that is known as the in the form of the castings. And why this large amount of waste material? Because they also intake a lot of the mud through their proboscis and through their mouth as well. So that's why their excretory material also contains a lot of mud, and they excrete in like the castings. Okay, here comes the nervous system of the acorn worm. The nervous system of acorn worms is ectodermal in origin, and lies at the base of the ciliated epidermis. As I told you in previous slide, that their epidermis is covered with the cilia. So their nervous system lies just below the epidermis, and it is why it is ectodermal in origin, because during the embryonic development, this nervous system is originated from the ectoderm membrane of the embryo. So it consists of dorsal and ventral nerve tracts. Here in this picture you can see this is the ventral nerve tract in blue color, and this is the dorsal nerve tract or the trunk nerve cord. So this is just lie below the first layer is the epidermis, ciliated epidermis, and this blue line that you can see here is just lie below the epidermis. So the nervous system is just below the epidermis, and it is ectodermal in origin. It is originated from the ectoderm layer of the embryo, and it consists of the dorsal nerve and the ventral nerve, and a network of epidermis cells also present form the nerve plexus. Plexus means network. So what do they have in the nervous system? Their nervous system is ectodermal in origin, and they have the dorsal nerve cord, they have the ventral nerve cord. Dorsal nerve cord is also known as the trunk nerve cord. And besides these two nerve cords, they have the epidermal cells that form the network on the whole epidermis of the nerve network. All right. Then gas exchange. So gas exchange is mainly done by the diffusion. In addition to diffusion through body wall, respiratory gases are exchanged at the pharyngeal slits. What happens? Water enters from the mouth into the acrine worm, and then they circulate, and then gases are get exchanged, and then the water exits the body of the acrine worm through the pharyngeal slits. Okay, here you can see the pharyngeal slits. Water enters through mouth, it circulates in this area, gas exchange will be done here, and then the water exits from these gill slits or the pharyngeal slits. Next is about the circulatory system. This circulatory system consists of, again here you can see, consists of a dorsal ventral vessel. This is the ventral side of the worm, this is the dorsal side of the worm. You know that the upper side is known as the dorsal side and lower side is known as the ventral side. In our case, our front is the ventral and our back side is the dorsal. Yes, we are talking about right now the circulatory system of acrine worm. Their circulatory system consists of two major vessels. Here you can see in red. This is the ventral vessel and this is the dorsal blood vessel. This one is the dorsal blood vessel. Now you can see here you can see the heart, right, in the anterior of the worm. So you can say that blood is distributed to the anterior region through the dorsal vessel and to the posterior region through the ventral vessel. Means the front of the acrine worm will be provided by the blood through dorsal blood vessel, and back of the or tail region or anus region of the worm will be provided by the blood through ventral blood vessel. Now talk about the reproduction and development of the Enteropneusta or the acrine worm. Well, acrine worms are dioecious, dime two, right? So the both male and female organs will be present in two different worms, two different individuals. They have the two rows of gonads that are present in the anterior region of the trunk. Anterior region, as I told you in the previous slide, the front region is known as the anterior region that has the proboscis and the collar, and just behind the collar is the trunk anterior region. So gonads in two rows are present in that region. Fertilization is always external. When one worm spawn in the area or one worm lays egg in the area, then it induces the other worms in the surrounding area to spawn the sperms there. All right. Then after the fertilization, a ciliated larva, the larva that is covered with cilia, will be produced, and its name is special, that is the tornaria larva. Acromworm's larva is known as the tornaria. Its shape is like this. This is the Tornaria larva. Okay, it swims plankton for several days. Planktons are the those organisms. If we talk about the larva, then it swims like a plankton, means that it floats in the water and to few days to the weeks. And finally, what happened? This Tornaria will settle on a substrate and gradually it will be developed into the adult acorn worm. Okay, the second class of phylum Hemichordata is the class Pterobranchia. So this class is very small class, and like all other hemichordates, they all are marine and they live in the deep oceanic waters of southern hemisphere. Because this is a very small class, only few species are known, only 20 species are known, and they are not small only in case of their number of species, but they are also small if you talk about their size, because they range in size from only zero point 0.1 to 5 millimeter. As if we compare their size with the Enteropneusta, then they were about 10 to 40 centimeters and even 2 meters, but they are very small, they are just zero point 0.1 to 5 millimeter. Enteropneusts live in burrows that they dug by themselves with the help of their proboscis, but in case of Pterobranchia, they live in the tubes that they secrete by themselves, and in their tubes they produced asexual colonies. So they made their homes by themselves, and their home is their tube. And they are filter feeders. Filter feeders means what? That when water baths through their gills, the food particles are trapped, and the rest of the water exit the body. So they are filter feeders. They filters the food particles through the water. And gas exchange is done by the diffusion. Diffusion, you know that it is the movement of the molecules or substance from higher concentration to the lower concentration. So they are as small, they are very small animals. They don't need some extraordinary excretory structures or respiratory structures. Gas exchange and even waste exchange is done only and only by diffusion. Now the morphology of the anterior news. Sorry, the morphology of the pterobranchs. Yes, um, pterobranchs are, as I told, that they live in the tubes that they secrete themselves. Here you can see that their body is also divided into three parts. First is the proboscis. This proboscis is shield-like. This is not the extensible organ. This is the shield-like proboscis, and it secretes. This proboscis secretes the tubes. These yellow you can see. These are the tubes. All right, and inside the tube, this is the body of the pterobranch. They have the U-shaped trunk. The trunk is like U-shaped. They have the first part of the body is the proboscis, but proboscis is not the conical structure, but it is shield like. All right, and then behind the proboscis is the second part of their body, that is the collar. And collar has the arms. Even they have the 2 to 9 arms. Here two arms are only visible, one is this and the other one is this, and their arms have the ciliated tentacles. These are the tentacles. They are called ciliated tentacles because they are the tentacles, but they are very much in number. That's why they are known as the ciliated tentacles. So, and their trunk is U-shaped. Their proboscis helps them in secreting the tubes, and the same proboscis helps them to move within the tube. Now the reproduction and development of the pterobranchs. As I told you previously, that they reproduce asexually also by the and form the colonies that and they live in the tubes. But the asexual reproduction is responsible for making the colony, but they also do the sexual reproduction. They are dioecious. Sexes are separate in separate individuals, and fertilization is external. By the fertilization, a larva, planula-like larva forms, and this larva lives in the tube of the female. Now, as I told you that fertilization is external. So here I'm talking about the tube of the female. Okay, I'm not talking about the body of the female pterobranch. So the larva lives in the tube of the female, the tube that is secreted by the worm itself. All right. So, and after a few days, few time, the larva remains non-feeding. It does not feed at that time when it is living in the tube. So after some time, this larva exit from the female's tube, and it outside the tube it settles to some substrate and form a cocoon. Cocoon is what they form a protective silky case around themselves. The larva form for the protection. This is what is known as the cocoon. And formally and finally, it will be developed into the adult after metamorphosis. So this was all about the phylum Hemichordata. We discussed about two classes of Hemichordata. One was the Enteropneusta and the other one was the Pterobranchs. Okay, the next phylum that we are going to discuss is the phylum Chordata. But as we are today, our topic of discussion is Protochordates, so we will discuss only those subphylum of the phylum Chordata that have the Protochordates characteristics. If we talk about the phylum Chordata, then this phylum includes around 45,000 species, and it includes all many large animals, and some animals of them are very economic importance, have many economic importance. So phylum Chordata includes most highly evolved animals. As we know that we humans are also belongs to phylum Chordata, but its class vertebrae. The vertebrates as well as the marine invertebrates, cephalochordates and urochordates, that is amphioxus and the tunicates. This is what we will discuss in our later slides. We will be discussing only two subphylum of the phylum Chordata, that is the invertebrate subphylum Cephalochordata and the urochordates. Okay, students, this is the classification of chordates. Here I have given the classification just to make the picture clear that what we are going to discuss and what we are not going to discuss. Here, if you see that chordates have been divided into tunicates, lancelets, hagfishes, lampreys, sharks, bony fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. These all are known as this chordata. They all belong to the phylum Chordata, in which after hagfishes, these all the subphylum Vertebrata. These subphylum Vertebrata belongs to the group Craniata. Craniata means the animals that have the proper cranium or the brain box. But our focus would be these two subphylums, Urochordata and Cephalochordata. Why? Because they belong to the chordata, but they are the protochordates. And they also known as the acraniata because they lack the cranium or they lack the proper skull or brain box. So our focus will be Urochordates and Cephalochordates today. Okay, these are the fundamental characteristics that are present in the chordates. Now, what are these? First of all, notochord. As I told you, the notochord is a flexible rod-like structure that is mostly present at the dorsal more towards the dorsal side. This is very fundamental characteristic that should be present in the chordates as well as in the protochordates. Second is the nerve cord. Again, this is a hollow tube, fuel-filled tube that run along the length of the animal. Pharyngeal gill slits, these what we talked already in our previous slides, that these are the slits. Slits means openings that are present in the gills and are also perforate or also forms the opening in the pharyngeal wall. That's why they are known as the pharyngeal gill slits. We can also call them gill slits. We can also call them pharyngeal slits. All right. Anal tail. Anal tail is one of the most fundamental characteristic of the chordates. Tail is present at the anal site. Bilateral symmetrical. They are chordates are bilateral symmetrical. They have the bilateral symmetry. Bi means two, and lateral means sides. So the bilateral symmetry is that symmetry in which we can divide the body into two equal parts, right? From anterior to posterior. So two parts are exactly same, that are the like mirror images of each other. So such kind of symmetry is known as the bilateral symmetry. Deuterostomate animals, all chordates are deuterostomate animals because the blastopore of the embryo develops eventually into the anus. Endostylothyroid gland. Endostyle is an organ that is present in the pharyngeal region and that helps in the filter feeding. And ventral contractile blood vessels or heart. On the ventral side, they have the heart. Complete digestive system is present. Here you can see this is the post anal tail. All right. Post anal tail means the post after. Uh, this tail is present after the anus. These are the pharyngeal slits. These are also called gill slits. These are also called pharyngeal gill slits. This is the nerve cord, dorsal hollow nerve cord. Hollow means only it has a fluid, it's like empty. And this is the notochord, a flexible cartilaginous rod is known as the notochord. So these all are the fundamental characteristics of the chordate. Okay, let's talk about the fates of the notochord. Fates mean destiny of the notochord. That notochord eventually develops into which structure, either it got disappeared or it will develop into something else. So let's read the notochord. First is the definition of the notochord. Exact. The notochord is an elongated, flexible, cartilaginous, rod-like skeletal structure that lies dorsal to the gut tube and ventral to the nerve cord. If you remember the previous slide, first is present the nerve cord, Then under the nerve cord is present the notochord. So we could say that first nerve cord, so on the ventral side of the nerve cord is the notochord. And if we talk about the gut, then it present on the surface of the gut. It is present on the upper side of the gut. So we could say that the notochord present dorsal to the gut and ventral to the nerve cord. All right. In most adult chordates, the notochord disappears or becomes highly modified, or it is surrounded and replaced by a vertebral column. So these this what it is here. We talked about the uh, more advanced chordates like humans. You can feel the vertebral column. You know that we have the vertebral column. The notochord eventually develop into a proper vertebral column in higher chordates like humans. In some non-vertebrate chordates and fishes, the notochord persists as a laterally flexible but incompressible skeletal rod. In case of the higher vertebrates, it develops into a modified and special vertebral column. Okay, but in case of the lower chordates or non-vertebrate chordates, they are the chordates because they have the chordate characteristics. They have the pharyngeal slits, they have the posternal tail, and they have the rest of the chordate characteristics. They have the notochord, but notochord will not develop into the vertebral column. Instead, it persists and it is flexible, but it is not compressible. We cannot compress it. Okay. In some species, it differentiates in embryogenic into the brain anteriorly and spinal cord that runs through the trunk and the tail. Together, the brain and the spinal cord, the central nervous system. So what happened here that in many species, it develops into the brain and it develops into the spinal cord, and these two things, brain that is in the skull in the cranium, and the spinal cord that runs along the vertebral column, right? So both collectively known makes the system that is known as the central nervous system. Okay, the phylum we are going to discuss is the subphylum Urochordata. This is the subphylum of the phylum Chordata. Urochordates have the notochord, but that notochord extends just behind the head and approaches the tail. All members of the subphylum Urochordata are known as the tunicates. This subphylum is divided into many classes, mainly three classes: Ascidians, and mainly three classes. Like here, you can see Ascidians, Appendicularians, Appendicularians also known as the Larvaceans, and Thaliaceans. But the major class is Ascidians, and that is comprised of the tunicates. The word tunicate, why? Because they have the sac-like covering, or they have the tunic. That's why they are called tunicates. Here you can see here. This is the adult tunicates, and that are covered by a sac or a tunic. That's why they are known as the tunicates. And this tunic is composed of a material that is known as the tunicine. Tunicine is somewhat like the cellulose. Cellulose, it is what? It is the polysaccharide. So adult tunicates are sessile. They don't move much, but they remain attached themselves to the substrates. And they can live in the form of colonies, as well as they can live alone or solitary. And they are mostly appendicularians, and thalassians are mostly planktonic as adults. Means they are filter feeders, right? And they feed by filtering the water. Sessile Urochordates attach their sac-like bodies to the rocks, and because their bodies are like sac-like, and this sac is called the tunic, and they attach their bodies to the rocks or pilings and any other hard or solid substrates. Okay, here's the anatomy of the organ system. The unattached end of the urochordates contains two siphons that permit seawater to circulate through them. Here you can see that this portion, this is the lower portion. This portion is attached to the substrate, and this is the free portion. This has the two siphons. One is the incurrent siphon, and this is known as the excurrent siphon. What happened? The water enters through the incurrent siphon, it circulates through the body where gas exchange and filter feeding is done, and then finally exit through the excurrent siphon. So one siphon, that is the inlet for water. This is also known as the oral siphon. We call it the oral siphon. And the second siphon, this siphon is known as the excrement siphon as well as arterial siphon. This arterial siphon, and this is the oral siphon. Now let's read it. One siphon is the oral siphon, which is the inlet for the water circulating through the body and is usually directly opposite to the attached end of the ascendants. It also serves as a mouth opening. Here you can see that this is the attached end and it is directly opposite to the attached end. So, what is directly opposite to the attached end? The inlet siphon, incurrent siphon, or the oral siphon. These three names you could give to this opening. And the second siphon, the atrial siphon, is the opening for the excurrent water. Okay, if we talk about the body wall of the tunicates, then already we have read about the tunic. So the body wall is first we talk about the tunic. The outermost layer is the sac, that is the tunic, and that is of connective tissue. Basically connective tissue like covering, and it has a gel like or jelly like appearance, but it is very tough. It's not it is mucus like, it is jelly like, it is flexible, but at the same time it is tough covering. And this covering is actually secreted by the epidermis of the body wall. Epidermis, the outermost layer of the body wall or the skin is called epidermis, right? So this epidermis actually secretes the tunic of the tunicates. It is composed of cellulose and various salts and the proteins. And now this tunic not only have the proteins and various salts, but this tunic also have the blood vessels and blood cells. All right. Now these vessels and blood cells are actually derived from mesoderm layer. You already know, I think, about the three germ layers: ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. These are three germ layers. These are three embryonic layers. So mesoderm is present between the ectoderm and endoderm. So these cells or these blood vessels and blood cells that are incorporated into the tunic or the gel-like outer sac of the tunicates are derived from the mesoderm. Body wall also contains both longitudinal cells, elongated cells, and as well as the circular cells. And these cells help the tunicate to change their shape. Longitudinal and circular muscles below the body wall epithelium help to change the shape of the adult tunicate. Okay, now the nervous system of Urochordates. Nervous system is mostly confined or attached to the body wall of the Urochordates. Again, nervous system is the form of the network of the nerves, nerve plexus. All right, but only with a single ganglion. Now, what is the location of that ganglion? In previous slide, we have talked about the two siphons. So the location of the ganglion is between the oral and the atrial siphon. I will show you in the later slides. This ganglion is what? Ganglion is the collection of the nerve cells, especially the nerve cell bodies. All right. So they have a single ganglion, but this ganglion is has no role in body coordination. But body is coordinated by many nerve cells, many receptors that are present for the chemical as well as for the mechanical stimuli. So these receptors help them to sense the any kind of chemical stimulus around them, and the respond to that stimulus, as well as these receptors help them to respond for the mechanical stimulus. Mechanical stimulus is a stimulus that could be the touch stimulus, that could be the change in the pressure in your surrounding, that could be the waves of the water, pressure of the waves of the water, that could be the turbulence of the water. So these all are the mechanical stimuli. So the receptors are present all over their body wall. especially around the siphons. All right. So tunicates are more coordinated through their receptors rather than their only single ganglion. This is what about the nervous system of the tunicates. Okay. Atrium. Here we study atrium. Okay, first, let me show you the ganglion. This is the incurrent or oral siphon. This is the atrial siphon, and this what here it is located, the nerve ganglion, the only one nerve ganglion they have. All right. Okay, atrium, the most obvious internal structure of the urochordates, is a very large pharynx and a cavity. This very large cavity is known as the atrium. This is all dark peach color shows the largest cavity, that is known as the atrium. And atrium surrounds the pharynx laterally and dorsally. On both sides of the pharynx, a cavity pharynx is surrounded by a cavity, and that cavity is known as the atrium. The pharynx of tunicates originates at the oral siphon and is continuous with the remainder of the digestive tract. Here you can see the pharynx, which is located to the oral siphon. Here, this is the endostyle. Endostyle is the organ that helps in the filter feeding. This what all the pharyngeal region, and it is covered with the cavity that is known as the atrium. The oral margin of the pharynx has a tentacle that prevents large objects from entering the pharynx. Okay, the oral margin near the oral siphon, the pharynx has the tentacles, which is not shown right now in the picture. What is the function of that tentacles? That tentacle stops or prevent large object from entering the pharyngeal region. Okay, now the digestive system of urochordates. Urochordates have the complete digestive system that starts from the mouth, then pharynx, and finally ends up at the anus, that is present near the atrial or excurrent siphon. So what happened here? Water enters, as they are the filter feeders, so water enters through the oral siphon or the mouth into the pharyngeal region. Now, pharyngeal region has a endostyle organ that helps in the filter feeding. How? Because a endostyle is like a furrow, or it is a narrow path-like structure. It secretes mucus, and mucus is, you know, that it is what it is, the liquid with thick consistency, or you can say jelly-like material. So when water passes through the endostyle, the food particles get trapped into the mucus that is secreted by the endostyle. So these food particles brought into the oral siphon with incurrent water are trapped in the mucus sheath and pass dorsally. Got it now? Now what happened? Then the water moves from here. In the pharyngeal region, gas exchange is also done, right? Uh, from here, then through the stomach, and then finally all the food particles, and then finally the waste product will be excreted out through anus, ultimately through the excurrent siphon to the out of the body. In addition to its role in feeding, the pharynx also function in gas exchange. Gases are exchanged as water circulates through the tunicates. Okay, now the circulatory system of the urochordates or tunicates. Well, their heart lies just at the base of the pharynx, and one vessel from the heart gives the blood anterior. This is the anterior portion of the tunicate, and this is the posterior. So, one vessel from the heart gives the blood to the anterior portion to the endostyle and pharynx, and other to the posterior portion to the rest of the digestive system. Two vessels are there. Here, if here you can see, this is the heart that is present at the base of this is the heart that is present at the base of the pharynx. So it has the two vessels. Now this heart beats, but it because of its contractions, blood will not flow in one direction. So blood will flow, for few beats blood will flow in one direction, and for the few beats its direction will be reversed. So we can say that the blood flow to the heart is not unidirectional, not in the one direction. Okay, now the reproduction and development of the urochordates. Eukaryotes are monoecious. Uh, Both sex organs are present in the same organism, but cross fertilization is the rule. Except in some species. In some species, there is a self fertilization, but in most of the species, cross fertilization does occur. As you know, that cross fertilization means that the female gametes will fused up with the male gametes of the other organism. But in case of self fertilization, both gametes will be provided by the same organism. So, what happened here that for the external fertilization, as major rule is external fertilization, so gametes will be exited through the body, exited from the body through the atrial siphon or the excurrent siphon. But for the self in case of self fertilization, eggs may be retained in the atrium for fertilization and the early development. So in this picture you can see easily this is the metamorphosis of the Eukaryotes. This is a free swimming larva and it has the notochord here in the tail, right? So that's why they are known as the Eukaryotes tailed notochord. And this is the earlier larva. Now notochord is getting reduced. This is the late metamorphosis, and this is the degenerating notochord. Here, you can easily see that or easily observe that the larva has changed its direction. Now it is at this direction. All right, this is the oral and this is the atrial siphon. Finally, adult should be like this. Okay, this is all the detail of the metamorphosis. Tunicates, as you saw in the previous picture, that they start their life as a free living larva. At the start, the larva is free living and its shape is like a tadpole. It exhibit the chordate characters and it contains the nerve cord. It has the short notochord in its tail only. So metamorphosis begins after brief free appearing larva existence, and then the larva does not feed. During the free living stage, larva does not feed, but at later stages, it reach its maturity and it attaches itself to the bottom of the sea and undergoes to the retrogressive metamorphosing, and it loses its tail and most of the chordate characteristics. Most of the chordate characteristics will be disappeared from the tunicates, but only the single characteristic that left is the gill slits. And later it develops into a bear-like and usually sedentary adult form. Sedentary adult form is like that remain attached to the substrate that does not move too much. This is the sedentary form or sedentary way of life. Okay, another subphylum of the phylum Chordata that is included in protochords is the subphylum Cephalochordata. So their name suggests as cephalo mean head. So they have the notochord that extends from head up to the tail. Uh, their notochord persists throughout their life, and their nerve cord also extends from the head up to the tail. And the common members of this subphylum are the lancelets. They are very lean, thin, eel-like animals, and they used to spend their most of the time while being buried in the sand. But where do they are present? They are present throughout the world's ocean, but they don't prefer the deep ocean water, but they do prefer the shallow water with clean sand substrates. If you talk about the major genera of the cephalopods, then there are two basic genera, Branchiostoma and Asmetron. Branchiostoma are also known as Amphioxus. Lancelets are all known as the Amphioxus because they have the both tapered and pointed ends, and that's why this name is given to them. Only 45 species of this subphylum are known yet. Now, structure and anatomy of cephalochordates. Cephalochordates, you have seen in previous slide in the picture that they are elongated and laterally flattened organisms. If you talk about their size, then they are 5 centimeter long approximately. In spite of their streamlined shape, and because of their shape, they should be very fast swimmer, but they are very weak swimmers and they like to spend their most of the time in a filter feeding position. So in this way, they partly buried themselves, but their interior portion is always sticking out of the sand because they are filter feeders. So they take in water by the interior portion or mouth that the rest of the body will be buried in the soil, but or in the sand, but the interior end will be out of the sand. So, but unlike other chordates, notochord is consist of muscle cells. Because of the muscle cells, notochord shows somewhat contractions in the rod. So the contraction of these muscles increase the rigidity. What happened with the rigidity? They can push in them into the soil substrate. Because of the muscle cells of the notochord, they got the rigidity in their body, and because of this rigidity, they could push themselves into the soil. Relaxes at the same time when these muscle cells of the notochord got relaxed, it will help them for the swimming, though they are the weak swimmer, but they do swimming a little bit. Here you can see the lancelet anatomy. Mm, Now this is the mouth, right, and this is the exit portion. This is known as atriopore. In case of urochordates, the exit portion was the atrial siphon, but here it is known as the atriopore. These are the pharyngeal gill slits. Atrium cavity is known as the atrium. This is the anus, and this in yellow color, this is the notochord. No, in yellow color, this is the hollow nerve cord, and ventral to the nerve cord is what? Notochord. So we can say that notochord is present dorsal to the gut or the digestive system and ventral to the nerve cord, right? These are the tentacles that stops, of course, the major or big objects from being entering into the mouth. Okay, now the digestive tract is complete. Pharynx is large, as we see that pharynx is very large, elongated kind of pharynx is there, and it has the numerous pharyngeal slits or the gill slits. As you know, they are filter feeders. So what happen? Water enter into their mouth, driven by the cilia. Cilia help or cilia facilitate the cephalochordates to take in the water into the buccal cavity, and then water moves through the passes through the numerous pharyngeal slits where food is trapped in the mucus. Okay, so when which is then moved to by the cilia into the intestine. First, water enters through the mouth with the help of the cilia, then it passes through the whole digestive system and through the pharyngeal slits, and from where the food particles and then move to the intestine for further digestion. Digestive enzymes secreted by the hepatic cecum. There are the pouches of the intestines that are known as the hepatic cecum, and filtered water finally leaves the body through atriopore, as I told you in the previous slide. That exit of pore of the cephalochordates is known as the atriopore. Cephalopods don't have special organ for respiration. They just respire through their general body surface. And for excretion, they have the paired nephridia. You know that nephridia plays the same role as the kidney plays role in vertebrates. It removes the waste material from the body. Circulatory system, cephalochordates do not possess a true heart, but they have the two major vessels. One is called the dorsal aorta, that is present at the dorsal side of the cephalochordates, and other is called the ventral aorta. These two are the major vessels present dorsal and ventral side respectively. Blood baths the tissue spaces because they have the open circulatory system. They don't have the closed circulatory system, so blood definitely will flow through the tissue spaces. Their blood lack erythrocytes, their blood lack hemoglobin. You know that hemoglobin that carries the oxygen. So the blood do what? Blood just transport the nutrients. It has no role in the gas exchange of the cephalochordates. Okay, reproduction. Cephalochordates are dioecious, means hermaphrodite. Both sex organs, male and female, are present in different individuals, in separate individuals. Sex cells or gametes are set free in the atrial cavity and they pass out of the body through the atriopore. Fertilization is external and that leads to bilateral symmetrical larva. Now, what is bilateral? I told you that first they have the larva that is asymmetrical larva, but finally it metamorphose into a bilateral symmetrical larva. The bilateral symmetry is that symmetry in which you can divide the body into two equal halves, or the two halves of the body are the mirror images of each other. So larvae are free swimmers, but they eventually settle to the substrate, and before metamorphosing into the adult, they attach themselves to the some kind of the substrate. A life cycle of you can say of the cephalochordates. Here you can easily see that okay, here fertilization occurs. This is the fertilized egg. First ciliated neurula formed, and it takes several hours. Neurula, it is an embryo at the neurula stage where the neural tube forms. And then it becomes the elongated ciliated neurula and finally asymmetric larva. As I told you, these all black hairs are the cilia. It has the mouth, and this larva then after several months will be converting to the metamorphic larva, and it will have the bilateral symmetry, and from this to the adult stage it will take around 1 year. This is the female and this is the male cephalochordate or lancelets. All right, this was all about the reproduction of the lancelets. Well, students, this was all about the protochordates. So we talked about the protochordates and three phylums, one that are included in the protochordates. One is the phylum Hemichordata. Then in that we talked about the two classes of Hemichordates. Then we talked about the phylum Chordata, and in phylum Chordata we discussed two subphylums, the phylum Urochordata and phylum Cephalochordata, because phylum Urochordata and phylum Cephalochordata are the protochordates, including these three: Hemichordata, Cephalochordata, and Urochordata. These three are the primitive chordates, or you would say that they are the lower chordates. Thank you so much, students. Have a nice day. Allah Hafiz.